Tonya disengaged the beacon from the dock and was back in her beloved solitude. The engines hummed as they pushed her deeper into space, pushed her towards a lifeline. The Hades system was a tomb, the final monument of an ancient civil war that obliterated an entire system and the race that inhabited it. Tonya had it on her list of places to study, but every year Hades was besieged by fresh batches of young scientists exploring it for their dissertation, or treasure hunters looking for whatever weapon cracked Hades 4 in half. So the system became more noise to avoid. Tonya had to admit that passing Hades 4 was always a thrill. It's not every day you get to see the guts of a planet killed in its prime. Then there were the whispers that the system was haunted. There was always some pilot who knew a guy who knew someone who had seen something while passing through the system. The stories ranged from unexplained technical malfunctions to full-on sightings of ghost cruisers. It was all nonsense. There was a loose stream of ships passing through Hades. The general flight lane steered clear of the central planets. Tonya slowed her ship until there was a sizable gap in the flow of traffic before veering off towards Hades 2. She passed a barrier of dead satellites and descended into Hades 2's churning atmosphere. The beacon jolted when it hit the clouds. Visual went to nil and suddenly the ship was bathed in noise, screaming air and pressure. Tonya kept an eye on her scopes and expanded the range on her proximity alerts to make sure she didn't ram a mountain. Suddenly, the clouds gave way. The beacon swooped into the light gravity above a pitch-black ocean. Tonya quickly recalibrated her thrusters for atmospheric flight and took a long look at the planet around her. As was expected, it was a husk. There were signs of intelligent civilization all around, but all of it was crumbling, charred, or destroyed. She passed over vast curved cities built atop sweeping arches meant to keep the buildings from ever touching the planet itself. Tonya maintained a cruising altitude. The roar of her engines echoed through the vast empty landscape. The sun was another casualty of this system's execution. The cloud systems never abated, so the surface never saw sunlight. It was always bathed in a dark greyish-green haze. Tonya studied the topography to plot out a course and set the scanners to look for the unique Curium signature she had programmed. She engaged the autopilot and just looked out the window. Being here now, she kicked herself for not coming sooner. It didn't matter that this was one of the most scientifically scrutinised locales in the UEE. Seeing the vastness of the devastation with her own eyes, Tonya felt that tug that a good mystery has on the intellect. Who were they? How did they manage to so effectively wipe themselves out? How do we know they actually wiped themselves out? A few hours passed with no luck. Tonya had a quick snack and ran through her exercise routine. She double-checked her settings on her scans for any errors on the initial input. A couple months ago, she was surveying a planet and found nothing, only to discover on her way back that there had been one setting off that scuttled the whole scan. It still bugged her. It was an amateur mistake. She brought up some texts on Hades. Halfway through a paper on the exobiology of the Hadesians, her screen pinged. Tonya was over there like a shot. The scope gave a faint indication of Curium below. She triple-checked the settings before getting her hopes up. They seemed legit. She looked out the front. A small city sat above endless sea of dead trees lay ahead. It looked like an orbital laser or something had hit it, excising massively deep craters from buildings and ground. Tonya took a closer look. The craters went about 600 feet into the ground, revealing networks of underground tunnels. They looked like some kind of transport system. Tonya looked for a suitable landing spot with cover from overhead flights. If she was still here when the prospectors showed up, her ship would be a dead giveaway and things would get complicated. She strapped on her environment suit and respirator. She could check the ship's scanners through her mobiglass, but threw another handheld scanner and mapper in with her mining gear just in case. Finally, she powered up her transport crate, hoping the anti-gravity buffers would be more than enough to lug the Curium back. Tonya stepped out onto the surface. The wind whipped around her, furiously kicking up waves of dust. She pushed the crate in front of her through the blasted forest. Gnarled branches clawed at her suit as she passed. The city loomed overhead, black silhouettes against the grey-green clouds. Her curiosity got the better of her, so Tonya decided to take a ramp up to the city streets. She told herself the detour would be easier on the crate's battery. Smooth streets are easier for the anti-grav compensators to analyse than rough terrain. Tonya moved through the barren, empty streets in awe. She studied the strange curvature of the architecture. Each displayed an utterly alien yet brilliant understanding of pressure and weight dispersal. This whole place seemed at once natural and odd, intellectually fascinating and emotionally draining. The Kerium signature was still weak, but there. Tonya manoeuvred the crate around destroyed teardrop-shaped vehicles. Pit marks in the buildings and streets led her to suspect that a battle had taken place here however many hundreds or thousands of years ago. The crater closest to the Kerium was a perfect hole punched through the middle of the city into the ground. Tonya stood at the edge, looking for the easiest way down. The crate could float down, but she would have to climb. In a matter of minutes, she secured a line with safeties for herself and the crate. She stepped over the edge and slowly rappelled down the sheer wall. The crate was making what should be a simple descent a little more complicated. The anti-grav buffers meant that any kind of force could cause the crate to drift away, so Tonya needed to keep a hand on it at all times. To make matters worse, the wind started picking up, flinging small rocks, branches, and pieces of debris through the air. A shrill scream tore through the air. Tonya froze. She heard it again and looked for the source. The screaming was just exposed supports bending in the wind. Suddenly she realised the crate had slipped out of her grasp. It slowly drifted further out over the crater. The swirling wind battered it around like a toy. Tonya strained to reach it, but the crate floated just out of reach. She kicked off the wall and swung through the churning air. Her fingertips barely snagged the cargo before she slammed back against the wall of the crater. Her vision blurred and she couldn't breathe from the impact. The HUD went screwy. Finally, she caught her breath. She took a moment or two before continuing down. The scanner from the beacon couldn't isolate the signature any clearer to determine the depth, so she had to rely on her handheld. The Kerium looked like it was situated between two tunnels. Tonya secured the crate, climbed into the upper tunnel, and tied off her ropes. She checked her suit's integrity in the debris storm. The computer was a little fuzzy, but it gave her an OK. She turned on a flashlight and activated the external mics on her suit. The tunnel was a perfectly carved tube that sloped into the darkness. Tonya couldn't see any kind of power or rail system to confirm her transport tube theory. She started walking.
Hello, I'm Winston Churchill, and I use NordVPN to defend the Internet Empire. We will fight the ants on the beaches. We shall fight on the Internet. We shall fight the trackers and the malware. Whether we want to watch Netflix for another country or have greater accessibility to the Internet, we will defend our island home. At any rate, that is what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Winston Churchill. What? What do you mean, Tin? That wasn't Winston Churchill? Point still stands. Go to nordvpn.com/BoredGamer to get yourself discounted NordVPN, or use the links below. Every month we have a ship giveaway. For November, we're giving away a Crusader Spirit C1. It's a fantastic looking multi-role ship that can fit a vehicle in the back or a load of cargo, and it looks really cool. It's got loads of forward-facing weaponry and a tractor beam. As it's a concept ship though, the winner will have a Cutlass back in the meantime as a loaner. It comes with access to the game and lifetime insurance too, so bam! Even if you don't have Star Citizen stuff yet, you can get straight into the game with this. It's all you need. Just comment on any of my videos this month to be in for a chance of winning. A massive thank you to everyone that has used the join button under my videos to become a channel member, and my Patreons. You guys are awesome. It really does help the channel. Please consider becoming one of those lovely people too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the verse.